Welcome to this lunchtime listen session at the Goode Intelligence Identify 2021 event. I'm joined by Joe Bloemendaal, a digital identity strategist and advisor. For close to 20 years, Joe ran sales teams and loved being responsible for the business development in technology companies. Well before the digital identity space was the real industry it is today, Joe co-founded a technology company specialized in remote verification and data checks. That set him on the path of building and shaping the international digital ecosystem of identity verification we know today, helping business securely verify and protect identity claims whilst proactively mitigating the risks of fraud and identity theft. Twice in his career, he joined founding teams in companies' early stages, remaining there until they were acquired. He's an entrepreneur at heart and enjoyed building them from local to international organizations. Joe takes a practical approach to his strategic involvement and is specialized in remote identity verification, eKYC, AML, biometrics, and digital fraud. He sits on advisory boards of startups, is frequently asked as a speaker on these topics, and actively pursues opportunities to work with the teams that create technology to protect personal data, develop digital sovereignty, and trust. Welcome, Joe. Thanks.
Well, thank you very much, Alan. Great introduction. And thank you for inviting me to Identify 2021 this year. I want to talk to you about biometrics today and hope you're enjoying your lunch. So for the past 18 months, it's become painfully clear that we still haven't fixed a lot of the problems around bridging gaps between physical and digital identities, like Alan just talked about in the introduction. There's all sorts of points of interaction where these are necessary, and there's a lot that still needs to be done. And like you just heard, I've spent quite a number of years of trying to bridge one of these gaps at the very early stage of an interaction between somebody who's talking or trying to onboard themselves with a new company, typically called KYC verification. But today there's this different question that's keeping me up at night, and that really is my face now going to become my password? Because we wake up to news every day of new use cases for, let's say, facial recognition technology, a typical biometric solution. And that really indicates that biometrics are becoming our method of choice for authentication. And on the other hand, I can also hear and see this worldwide chatter, if you will, about what is going to be an acceptable, a responsible, and a proportional use of technology like that. So there's a little bit of doubt that's spreading around there as well. Going back to the basics, I mean, like many of you, I expect we all hate passwords. I hate them with a passion, but I believe a digital identity is a fundamental right, and reliable biometric solutions to protect that are very much becoming key. And that's because of the limitations of passwords we're all very familiar with, the physical token-based types of security solutions. All those are very well known to have all sorts of usability challenges, MFA solutions, KBAs, significantly security challenges with that type of technology. So yes, the biometrics are here to stay as a plug to fill in the gaps for authentication. But how do you then find the right solution for what you're trying to solve for? How do you evaluate these biometric solutions? And I'm not just looking at that from a business perspective, but also just as a consumer, for you and I, what to look for, what can I trust? And we've all become close to biometrics, and we've come to love the convenience, if you will, of the security of biometrics-based solutions. But on the other hand, we're also seeing a lot of news around more data being stolen. That's still happening every day. New technology being used to use and misuse our identities. Think of things like deep fakes. And there's so many examples of the potential damaging impact of this type of technology if it's used wrongly, or wrong intentions are being used there as well. So we can read about human rights activists and watchdogs who are alerting us for the controversial role of biometrics, sometimes even unintentionally, in perpetuating discrimination and infringement on civil liberties, We've seen articles about the misuse of face rec by regimes, targeting minority groups, misidentification of people who are then wrongfully arrested. I mean, this is all stuff that's happening with this technology already today. So it's not out there. It might happen. It's a great example of what we don't want to happen. So that's why these very personal questions keep me up at night. Should I stop taking selfies? Should I stop my kids uploading information on social media? It might be not such a great idea. I'm on a Zoom call because my voice is now out there and my face is out there. So using my face the way I've been doing in the last couple of years, has that now all of a sudden turned out to be a bad idea? Because again, is my face going to be my password? And the risk here is, like with any data, biometrics can be recorded, stolen, then misused. Identity theft goes back a long time. Deepfakes, I just mentioned, they're definitely not new, and they're on the rise. It's a really serious problem. I read a VentureBeat article recently that said that between June 2019, between October 2019 and June 2020, the increase was roughly 330% in number of deepfakes generated. And yes, some of that will be used for fun stuff like TikTok, but there's also real potential for that being used to influence major things like elections or implicate a person at a crime scene, things that are very damaging at sort of a population level, but also very much at a personal level. So I think you're getting my point here. I'm a little bit worried, but I'm also hopeful, somewhere in between. Happy to agree, though, that we need to create a way for biometrics to be used for authentication and authorization. And we need to know and understand, and I'm not saying I have the answers to all of this, but we need to know what to look for in a strong solution, both for the business again and for you and I. So what do I know? What have I found out so far? What to look for in a better biometric solution? Well, beyond the very obvious, I think one of the big strengths of a good biometric solution is that you wouldn't need any specific hardware to be able to use it. And I'll take it one step further. I don't think you should even be able to have to use any specific software or download an app, because that improves the user experience. And with a good user experience, that improves adoption. It lowers the barriers to adoption at least, which means that it's going to be used more, and that makes it just harder for the bad guys to get ahead of it. The second one I'm really looking for is multimodal biometrics. Using more than one biometric modality, let's say face and voice, really sort of makes the specific advantages of each modality, as they're called, stand out and stronger, and it diminishes the weaknesses of each individual modality. And that then usually increases the accuracy and will also significantly increase the security of the system as a whole. And one thing to add to that is, if you're using more than one modality, you're also sort of lowering this risk of one of these modality in the real world conditions that it's being used can be compromised, or that the effectiveness is compromised in that way. If you think of very bright light for face biometrics, that's something that we struggled with in the KYC world, where we're capturing a picture of an identity document alongside a selfie. If the conditions are not perfect and you just have one modality to go by, that then reduces the chances that the result will be what you're expecting for. If you think of an example of two modalities being captured by one sensor, that's another risk. I was thinking of this example, fingerprint and palm biometrics. Appreciate the fact that that's not a real use experience, but I think it demonstrates well, if that would be captured by one specific device, then it would be easy to develop an attack instrument that would simultaneously go for these two modalities. And using different sensors, that's the third point I'm looking at, makes it just so much harder for the bad guys to perform a penetration attack. one thing to keep in mind with using different sensors that jumped to mind just now is the user experience. Obviously, we can't. That's always going to be this balance. If we increase the friction too much, it's going to be too difficult to use. Yes, security goes up, but nobody will want to be using it. And the fourth point I've really been thinking about a lot recently is that if my face becomes my password and it becomes compromised, it's misused, it's stolen, it would be extremely hard for me to change it. So what if we'd have a feature that would be classified as a biometric with all its benefits, what we just talked about, but was changeable like a password? And that would then sit alongside another biometric like my face, because the face is a very strong biometric feature and very usable in a multimodal solution. So if we had that, I think that would make a very, very strong solution. So quickly wrapping up here, where I've landed for now, and really inviting you to join this conversation and let me know what you think about the ideas that I've just put out there. If my face is going to be my password, it can only be my password if something else is added to it. Ideally, something as strong as another biometric, really easy to use, but also revocable. And yes, has to be easy to use, has to be captured all in one phone. We can't have multiple devices capturing multiple modalities, has to be easy, because I hate poor user experiences like everybody else. And something that I will be using every day, because that's what I'm looking for. I want to get rid of all these passwords. So it's not just for one-time interactions or step-up authentication. It's something I will be using every day. It should be easy to use. And that's why I've sort of fallen in love with this idea of changeable biometrics, because that in combination with my face protects my face, but makes it very difficult for a bad guy to use it if it becomes compromised. And it then all of a sudden starts looking like an old school password, because the advantages of passwords are the fact that I can change it if something goes wrong, if it's compromised. If we had a biometric that could do the same, to me, that sounds like a really good idea. And the combination for now looks like sort of the holy grail that we should be looking for. I say for now because I do realize that there's always going to be this cat and mouse game with the bad guys. I've been in it for 20 years, like you've just heard, and we'll be in it for a while. But this is the thought I've wanted to share today. Thank you very much for having me. I hope you're enjoying your lunch, and I hope to interact soon with all of you. Back to you, Alan.
Thank you so much, Joe. That was a very thought-provoking presentation. I've got some questions for you. Let's start off with something that you mentioned at the end of your presentation about that kind of cat and mouse situation. And and I know, again, as someone who's been in the security business for a long time now, it is that it's never-ending. So with deep fakes specifically, are we looking at a battle between face biometric systems and ever more realistic and affordable deepfake attacks?
Potentially, yes. I mean, it's always difficult to find out it's a chicken and egg, who started what. Now that the fraudsters are getting this as well, we're going to be using faces instead of passwords. How are we going to try and access systems for the wrong reasons? So I think that cat and mouse game is going to continue also with deepfakes and selfies. I've been sort of recently started getting involved in a company that has developed a deepfake detector, and we're investigating exactly that. How big is this problem? Where is it popping up? And we're seeing the first traction with companies, identity verification providers, who really want to start integrating this type of technology to be able to find deepfakes and make sure that they don't pass their system. So there's a little bit of that battle coming up now, and people are really appreciating and understanding that we need to do something about it, because it could grow and impact us quite quickly across the board.
Yeah, and I think that kind of chimes with what we're seeing. As we're just in the middle of a research project into ID verification, and speaking to systems, providers and end users. The ability to detect deep fake attacks, the ability to detect presentation attacks and spoof attacks is critical at the moment for one of these systems, because if you can't do that, then you may be onboarding someone and they may be using a fake passport and somebody else's identity. Yep. So it's a crucial part, and it's becoming more and more critical in terms of as a top requirement in designing and adopting ID verification solutions. So thank you for that. So you mentioned multimodal biometrics and its use. Can you elaborate on the use of multimodal biometrics, and what does it look like, and what are the benefits?
I think the multimodal factor is just like we've done in IDV, adding more layers of protection to the system. So multimodal, we've become very used to using one modality. If I think of opening my iPhone, I used to do that with my fingerprint. That's one modality that then passed on, and I can start using my face, just making it slightly more easy for me to access my device. That's one modality. In a lot of use cases and for a lot of reasons, that's not going to be strong enough. Think about the deepfake problem. Think about the challenges around liveness detection that we have with face biometrics. All of that can be solved for. I think one of the solutions that companies are looking into now using multimodal biometrics. So they'll have face sitting alongside voice, or we're looking at behavioral biometrics alongside face, and there's a lot of goodness about that, and I think adding layers will make it so much harder, like I just said, for bad guys to get in, especially if you then think of the opportunity to use different sensors to capture these biometrics, the characteristics, and then having that all sort of sit as one token that would prove who I am, would make it extremely strong. So it's an evolution, and it's really going from passwords to all sorts of KBA, and then now we're going to single model biometrics, and the next step will definitely be multimodal, because we need those layers.
Yeah, and I think it's important, especially in authentication, is that there is a movement towards it, and it is a journey that we have more passive interaction and continuous authentication. So kind of a risk engine deciding the likelihood that it is going to be Alan who's attempting to access his bank account after I've been verified using IDV. So yeah, I agree. And I think it is definitely a trend, and many organizations are working towards achieving that end, I think. So also you mentioned changeable. Now, I think it's a really fascinating aspect of biometrics at the moment. I've read a couple of academic papers on this, in terms of the use of hash biometrics, and also having a biometric that we change, because if you're talking identity and access management lifecycle, the ability to revoke a credential is a crucial part of it, because as you said, things can be lost, stolen, etc. So how far away, define a little bit more about what you mean by changeable biometrics, and how far away are we from that?
Yes, it was really an eye-opener when I thought about this, and I was introduced to something that is a changeable biometric, because it feels like a contradiction, doesn't it? You either have a password that you could change, or you have a biometric. And biometrics, my face, my voice, my fingerprint. How do we change that? So a changeable biometric is something that is classified as a biometric because it's so unique that it could only be generated, in this case, by you, or generated by me in my case. So that's the changeable idea around a biometric. And there's not a ton of choice at the moment in this space. unfortunately. I've joined a team. I'm working with a team in a company called Asignio, and they've built something that is a changeable biometric, at least in my opinion. It's something that it's a symbol that you can draw on your device, and then it's captured together with, let's say your face. And now all of a sudden we've got a solution that is changeable if something goes wrong, but as strong as a multimodal biometrics, because we're capturing two at the same time. So I think it's an extremely interesting concept, because the downside of what I call a hard biometric is it's not changeable. Some of the other biometric solutions in the behavioral spectrum, which really some of the changeables are already placed in, if you will, is that they are a little bit intrusive, and that's a personal opinion, but it's having to follow me all the time. Whereas if I have something more like a one-time action, a bit like a passcode, but then a biometric, a password, but then a biometric, it feels a bit more that I'm in control of what it's capturing and when it's capturing. And then there's these interesting aspects around consent and active consent that you could add to it. So a changeable token that is classified as a biometric, that is captured in a multi-model, really does appeal to me and seems to me like a solution that we should all be thinking about.
Yeah, I've had a look at the Asignio solution, and it does look promising. So that's something that we can perhaps watch out for. So kind of wrapping up here, and thank you very much for your time, Joe. It's been a pleasure having you with us. If the audience would like to get in contact with you, what's the best method to do that?
The easiest is find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah.
My first name, surname's quite unique, so you'll find me there and reach out. Otherwise, there's email addresses that can be shared, obviously. So number one is definitely LinkedIn. And
Sure.
Alan, thank you very much for inviting me. It's always a pleasure to join you, and I'm looking forward to the rest of the event, definitely.
Thank you. That's great. Thanks, Joe, for your insight today. So if you found this session useful, check out our other content on the Goode Intelligence YouTube channel. And I hope you enjoy the rest of the Identify event that is happening. So all the best, and thank you.